This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
Games, gamification, and what that really means is, making your life, turning your life into a game, or in other words, creating a life where you're working hard but you're having fun, I think is the way to do it. I think society has learned that games aren't necessarily always a waste of time. I think the belief now is that games have evolved to a point to where people are actually learning life skills, and learning about life and learning about things that they can actually apply in real life.
Don't mind me, John. I'm just racking up my high score. Just some memories back to bring us back to the time when we were kids, and we used to pirate. Remember, we would stand in front of the Aladdin's arcade. They had the tokens, and if you stuck in $5, you got $7 worth of tokens. So me and John would take those extra $2 and sell them back to people as they went to go pay in the token machine and make some extra cash to play games. But you know what else is cool today, John? Is I'm wearing my Iron Man shirt and you have your Captain America shirt, and we had not planned that. And that's like Civil War. The movie's coming out in May, and it's basically Cap versus Iron Man. Well,
yeah, I mean, we think a lot alike. I mean, we were raised together, we grew up together, so of course we're going to do things that way. But yeah, it was a surprise. Those sound bites remind me of the 7-Eleven that we used to spend so much time in playing, Pac-Man and Asteroids and
Galaxian, man. I was the Galaxian champ.
Yeah,
before Galaga.
But a lot of people think that playing games isn't hard work, and it can be. I mean, it can be a challenge. Hard work, it could be a challenge. And when you play a game, you're having fun, but you're still working. You're working at it. And in some games like Tetris, you don't even have a chance of winning that game, but you have a chance of developing your skills. And I think that's one of the things that we can take away from trying to gamify your life, is that, life is going to be difficult. It is going to be challenging, but it's through those challenges and that hard work that you can build your skill set.
It is like Tetris, because when you think about it, it's never ending. You get little periods of where you have happiness and you kind of feel, comfortable, and all of a sudden it just keeps on coming at you, man. Life just keeps on rolling, and you got to adapt and change.
So since this is the first in the series, today we're going to talk about rules, because the way games are defined, there are 4 different components. One is that they have to have a set of rules involved with that game. I'm reading a book now by Jane McGonigal. It's called Reality is Broken. And she talks a lot about gamifying your life. She also wrote a book called Super Better, which sounds, I know I've talked about before. But so in order to have a game, to be considered a game, there are 4 parts. One is the rules. There has to be a set of rules. 2, or, they're not actually necessarily in order, but they also have to have an outcome or a goal. Whether that is, you're getting to a certain point and you win the game, or like Tetris, where you're just trying to develop your skills. It's infinite. It just keeps on going and going and going, keeps on getting harder and harder. There's no possible chance of you ever winning Tetris. And then the third is that you need a voluntary, you need to be voluntarily involved with it. No one is forcing you to do that. And then the last one, and of course I'm blanking at this moment, but
did you remember feedback?
Yes, feedback. Thank you so much. You need some way to score, know if you're winning or not, or know how you're doing. You need some type of feedback. Thank you so much. I don't know what's going on with me, but I just totally blanked. As you know, we don't really edit our shows, and that's real life.
I figure I'd let you falter for a minute or two before I came into your rescue. But I am wearing my Iron Man shirt, so I'm swooped in for the rescue for you, man.
He's out to get me today. Today's conversation is about rules, and a lot of people see rules as being limitations or restrictions. But the reality is that they don't necessarily have to be. They're really in place to give people a guide that governs behavior or actions. And rules really govern how we treat each other. In life, we talk about fairness and honesty, and rules define what's considered to be right or wrong, as well as what happens when you break a rule. So it's important really to know what the rules are, so you can break them.
Absolutely, man. I used to break rules when John and I were little. The arcade games had just come out, and we witnessed the growth of all computer games. I remember being a real little kid and seeing Pong, and the two guys, cowboys, and they would shoot at each other, and basically there was a cactus in the middle of them, and the bullets would go real slow and break away pieces of the cactus, and you could move up and down around the cactus, and finally you had to shoot it and kill the other guy. That was about as most violent as any of them got when we were kids. Most of them were based on Breakout, which was another one where the ball came down and you had a paddle and you had to break through the wall. Kind of like Tetris in a way, similar. And then Space Invaders was the big breakout hit for us. And then it went on from there with Asteroids and Caterpillar or Centipede. And Donkey Kong came along and revolutionized everything, and Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. So all the classics, that's what we grew up with. But they definitely, there's a nostalgic feel there too, that you can relate to, and you can actually relate these to your life easily.
Yeah, so we talk about games and rules in games, and if you really think about it, so take Scrabble for instance. This doesn't have to be a computer game. It can be a board game. It can be athletic games. There are a number of different types of games that we all enjoy. But if you think about Scrabble, Scrabble is a bunch of different tiles with the letter of an alphabet on there. And you can arrange those tiles in any way that you want and make up words. Well, isn't that the same as a typewriter? And you probably scratching your head at that one saying, typewriter? Typewriter's not a game. It's a tool that you use to write a letter, or if you even know what a typewriter is anymore. I mean, they've kind of gone the way of word processors and keyboards. But so you have these tiles, and you can make any word out of them. But that's not really a lot of fun. That's just typing or word processing. What is fun, and why Scrabble is fun, is because it sets rules, it sets restrictions or limits, and it limits you to 7 tiles, and you have to pick those letters at random. You pick them out, and it's a game of luck on what letter that you get. And then not only do you can you make words of your own, but you have to build on what other people are doing as well. It's fun, it's engaging, but it's a lot more fun than just typing a letter where much of the same rules apply.
John, we ought to give a little shout out to John that has the podcast called Classically Trained, and he has a book out also called Mastering the Game: What Video Games Can Teach Us About Success in Life. and he also has a TED Talk. He's a fellow podcaster in our podcast group, and you guys, might find some interest over there, especially if this episode piques your curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think games are being taken a lot more seriously than when we were growing up. I mean, I knew my parents thought it was a big waste of time that we played games. But as the games develop, and as they study games, it turns out that they're not really a waste of time. You actually learn a lot of skills that you can apply in real life.
Yeah, we learned how we got suckered by marketing when we got the Pac-Man that wouldn't go back and forth on the Atari. You remember that? Was it Atari 2600? I think the game for the Pac-Man, he would only face one way, and what was some other ones that we got gypped on? Asteroids, I think, was kind of lame. Spider-Man. Yeah, they all were pretty lame. I had a Spider-Man one, which was basically him climbing up the side of a building, and Green Goblin would float by on his glider and try to knock off his web, and people would drop potted plants on your head, and that was the whole game. Superman, that was a real bad one. And then they got a little bit better when Activision came out and created the Pit. You know what I'm talking about? The Pit Jumper or whatever it was, where it was like Indiana Jones and he would jump over. Maybe it was
yes, Dig Dug.
No, not Dig Dug. Dig Dug was the little character that went around and shoveled out little rocks so they'd drop on the little creatures' heads, and he would. And when he'd stab them with a spear, he'd inflate them and it'd blow up.
But rules, definitely apply to games, and Tom's mentioned a bunch of different games. But we all have rules in our lives, and as I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about how I used to say I don't play games, especially like with dating. I was like, I hate people who play games, and I guess what I learned over time is that we all play games, whether we realize it or not. Games play an important role in our life, especially when you're single and you're dating. You can say that you're not going to play games with a person. You're going to be straight up. You're going to be honest. You're going to be fair. But you're just getting to know that person, and you need ways to test them, test how they react to the things that you do, so you can establish boundaries and limits and really get to know the person through those games. They're not maybe even intentional. They're not even consciously driven, but we all play them to one degree or another. And it's important to recognize, when you play a game. And again, we define the game by 4 criteria. Are you keeping score? Are you getting feedback from that? Are there rules that you're playing, which are, limits or guides to your behavior? Are you doing it voluntarily? Are you willing participant? It's a lot of things in life that we do could be considered a game if you look at those components.
Absolutely. John, since our show is about personal change, I took the liberty of doing some research as far as what others out there thought were the rules of personal change. And I'm actually breaking the rules because I'm going to give you some rules. I'm not necessarily going to tell you how to break them, but I am going to give them to you. And I found this was real interesting. I found it on Psychology Today, and it's called the 10 Rules of Change, where change isn't easy but possible. An expert offers 10 Rules of Change by Stan Goldberg, which is a Ph.D. Some of the things he covered was, all behaviors are complex. So he would give a strategy. So that's the rule. And the strategy is to break down the behavior. All behaviors can be broken down, so you want to break them down into self-contained units. We practice this, and when we talk about setting small goals, rather than trying to take everything on at once, just try something simple. We often talk about if you want to start exercising, just start walking, just start moving. And don't try to make, I'm going to go to the gym and work every muscle in my body today and go for, a 40-minute jog on the elliptical. You need to start small and gradual so you don't drop it, so you can stay with it.
Yeah, and that's actually a way of feedback. If you think about it, some of the things that Tom just mentioned, it's a way of measuring. And in fact, rule it also is a way of measurement, and like Tom said, if you do things small, if you're looking to accomplish something, take it in small steps. Like when I was trying to pay off my debt, I looked some of the limits that I set, or some of the rules that I set in place, where I'm going to pay off, credit card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 50 or whatever. Kind of exaggerating there, but I always took my smallest bills first, and then I would tack one and pay it off, and then I'd move on to the next. And I kind of had a system in place of doing that, and that's how I measured my success. Once I paid off the smallest bill, I was like, woohoo. And I'd go on and I'd take that money that I was paying off the small bill with and apply it to the minimum balance of the next biggest bill. And I just kept on going and building that. So it was like Dave Ramsey calls that a snowball effect of paying off your bills. But it's just ways of measuring your progress. And because how will you know if you're accomplishing anything if you don't take a look at what you're doing and how you're doing it?
Okay, well, let me give you another rule so you can examine. Change is scary, right? It can result in clinging to the status quo of behavior. So one of the strategies that Mr. Goldberg suggests is examine the consequences. You compare all possible consequences of both your status quo and a desired behavior. If there's more positive results associated with the new behavior, your fears are really unwarranted.
Yeah, change is scary. And what's so scary about it, and you hit it right on the head with that, is that it's unknown. It's the unknown. It's the not knowing that scares the hell out of people. I'm going on a cruise in a couple of weeks, and my wife and I were flying into Fort Lauderdale, and we're not going to rent a car because we're just going like from the airport to on a cruise. But we're going to have a period of time to where, we're going to, a time before the cruise, we're actually going to get in the night before. So it's like, what do you do? I'm the kind of guy that likes to have his car, and I don't want to be dependent on anybody. So not having a car kind of scares me, but I know that it's not going to stop me in my tracks because I'm going to be in South Florida. There's Uber, there are taxis, there are shuttles. There's all sorts of different ways. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do at this point, but it's not going to stop me, and it's kind of fun. That unknowing is fun.
Absolutely. And also you want to be realistic too. When you set goals, you don't want to make them so lofty that they're going to be, unattainable or it's caused a fear. If you put something so much like, I gotta be at this point at this, in 5 months from now, I'm going to reach this goal, and it's going to be some thing that, you might not have control over, or you want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger by, next year. And it's just not possible. It's going to take years and years to acquire that. So you have to set realistic goals so they don't scare you, because then the closer you get to that date, you're going to be like, oh man. Or there's like, I know there's one guy that I don't know if he ever made it, but he said, in 6 months, I'm going to make $150,000, and he has all these different ways of trying to do it. That's I know he's trying to put himself out there, but it's also kind of an unrealistic goal, unless you're robbing a bank.
Yeah. And you know what? Cut yourself some slack. You're going to try different things and you're going to fail. We all do it. But what's important is that you try and you keep trying and you learn from that effort.
One of the other rules, John, is change must be positive. So they say that research demonstrates that reinforcement, not punishment, is necessary for permanent change. So it's not like when I was in the military and the drill instructors are threatening you with push-ups or God knows what else, or taking away your town pass. That doesn't work as well as being rewarded.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned push-ups, because I'm still doing daily push-ups. I do generally speaking, I do 3 sets a day. I do a minimum of 50, but sometimes I go over, sometimes I go less. And let's just face it, there are mornings where you haven't really slept all that great, or you're not feeling feeling well, and and that's fine. Or you miss, like I'll miss a set, like I get busy, life gets busy and throws something at you, and you only do 2 sets that day, or you do 1. Those things happen, and it's fine, and you shouldn't beat yourself up over it, because once you get on that path, you got to keep going. And then every time you do it, and every time you're successful, just telling yourself that you did a good job will often give you that reward that you need. It sounds so simple, that it seems kind of funny, that you would just tell yourself good job and that's a reward, but it really does work. It's these simple things that really make a difference in your life.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've been doing the same thing. I journal all my weights when I lift weights, and I had been making some really good progress on my incline bench, and I was happy. I mean, not like benching excessive weights, but for myself, I keep on seeing a steady growth, and I'll hit a plateau, and because I'll do like 5 sets of 5, and the last set's my heaviest weight, and sometimes I get like 3, and I'm like, man, I couldn't get the extra 2 reps, and the last 2 workouts I've got up to 5 on my heaviest weight, so I was happy. Well, this week when I was in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I got arm barred, and if you don't know, that hyperextends your elbow. And that's part of the muscle that you use to push when you're doing an incline press. So I missed my workout in the beginning of the week, and I was really bummed out, and I was like, man, and today I did it, but I was a couple of reps shy of what I did the last 2 workouts, but I knew that I just had to at least try it. And one of the strategies that they say that will help you accomplish that is, I had so many other exercise, or a couple other exercises mixed in, but I said, you know what, I'm just going to do the real basic. I'm going to do my incline, and I'm going to do just a light, triceps workout. I'm not going to push it, because that's the muscle that's sore. But you can simplify anything. So if it's too overwhelming, if it's in that case that you want to exercise, and you're like, I just don't have the energy today, do something. Don't just cop out and say, I'm not going to do it. Even if it's a walk around the block, to at least do something. It's better than doing nothing. And if you simplify it and take out the excess stuff that you don't need, you really can just, focus down and do maybe what's necessary.
What you mentioned, Tom, are these self-imposed limits that are basically rules that we put in place for ourselves. And a lot of the time we don't even recognize that we set up a rule for ourselves. Like, for instance, if you tell yourself that you're going to do a certain number of reps, like you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
in your exercise, you're pushing yourself, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do 1 more this next day. I'm going to do 1 more, and I'm going to keep pushing myself and keep pushing myself. And that's a general rule that a person would follow. Well, if you don't make that rule, you shouldn't beat yourself up, because it's going to happen. Again, like you said, you got to keep out there, and you got to keep trying and persevere and get through. Even if you can only do 2 is better than just sitting around feeling sorry for yourself and kicking yourself for not doing it.
Absolutely. And the reason I do those sets of 5 is it's a way to gauge myself and measure, because sometimes I can do more than 5, but I'll stop there, because if I can do more than 5, I know it's time to increase the weight. So it just gives me a method of being able to hold myself accountable. But there's some exercises I don't even really care about, as far as, I'll take the basics and I'll focus on increasing the weight. And sometimes some other exercises, I just do whatever, I can. Sometimes it'll be, 10, sometimes it'll be 6, and, I'll just go from there.
I had a buddy of mine that I knew in high school, and actually went to college with him too. And he used to always say, talk about rules, and talk about how there are no rules for life. And, at the time I agreed with him, but that's just not true at all. There are rules in place that guide our behavior, guide our actions, and even if we're not consciously aware of it. But imagine life without rules, not to get political, but, anarchy. is a life. Anarchists are people who believe that there should not be any laws, there should not be any government, and think about what that life would be if you're an anarchist. There's total chaos.
It would be like that movie, The Purge, where one night a year, in the future of United States, they allow anything to happen. So murder, any crime is allowed. So you can do whatever you want. And people go into their safe rooms and board up their houses, and people roam the streets and start raping and pillaging. It could be that way.
Yeah. I mean, being free to do whatever you want sounds like a lot of fun, but even if you are more free to do whatever you want, there are still rules in place. Most people are honest, and they're fair, and they're giving, and it's hard to imagine those are rules that you have in your life, that you govern your actions and your behaviors.
Right. And they're set there usually to protect you too. I mean, if everyone had ultimate freedom, then you really don't own anything, right? Because someone could just come and say, hey, no, it's mine now, because I'm free to take this whenever I want.
Yeah. And there's no recourse for that. I've heard a lot of people recently, talk about how they don't understand how someone could murder someone or some criminal act or something like that. And, it just boggles your minds, some of the things these people do. And the reason it boggles your minds is because it's so outside your own line of thinking that you can't even imagine doing something like that. That's just part of who you are. We find out that there are consequences to our actions. There are rules that we all have to follow, and those rules help us all get along and live in the society. So I'm certainly I'm not big government or anything. I'm not going to talk politics, but I do believe in individual freedom. I'm a big believer in individual freedom, but I also recognize that there is a need for law. There is a role for government, and that's the world we live in, and we need that structure.
So, John, we were still talking about how change must be positive, and I just wanted to throw a couple strategies out there real quick. One of them is you should think about rewarding yourself. I know we've talked about this as far as if you're quitting smoking cigarettes. You can take that money. I had a friend that did this at work. He took all the money that he used to spend on cigarettes, and at the end of the year, he went on a cruise. So I think that's an awesome way to do it. Simplify the process. I was just talking about this with weight training. Instead of, if I have 5 exercises and I just really don't feel like training that day, what I'll do is I'll say, what's the 2 basic exercises that I need? What's my one for my chest and which ones are my legs? So I'll do like the incline bench, and I'll do the squat, and everything else I don't even attempt them. But at least I did the 2 main things that will get me some results.
Yeah, when you talk about simplifying things, I think we often we overcomplicate our lives, and we want to jump right in to things. Like, say if you wanted to, exercise is a great example, because, I think everyone can relate to that and say, oh, I want to go run a mile. Well, you know how difficult that is to just, especially if you live a sedentary life and you're really overweight, it's difficult to even, walk around the block. You can't just expect yourself to start running.
Walking up a flight of stairs sometimes. I used to judge sometimes when I would go out to eat when I was at work, and I would park in the parking garage, and I'd park like on the 5th floor. And after lunch, I'd walk up the stairs, and I'd be like, my God, man, I need to really, I thought I was in good shape, but 5 flight of stairs are still kicking my ass.
Yeah. So, if you don't go for those lofty goals, be more realistic, and maybe start by walking up a flight of stairs, or, create some rules and some structure in your life that will help you get going. And, even if it's small steps, you'll get more confidence, and you'll keep building upon that. And really, that will really take you somewhere.
All right. So another rule is slower is better. So they,
yeah. Back in weightlifting, with the weightlifting analogies, they always say focus on form, not the number of reps that you're doing. First of all, it's more important to do an exercise with good form, because that's really that's giving you the foundation you need to build bigger muscle. So it's going to take you a longer time to build up the reps. If you're using good form, you won't be able to get as many reps in, but it will serve you better in the longer run.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because Jennifer, my wife, has done CrossFit for like 6 or 7 years, and her gym now has this really, they got rid of CrossFit. They dropped the name. They stopped participating in any competitions, and they stopped the classes. They slowly faded them out, and now they are based on movement. So what their belief is you should learn how to move before you try to learn how to lift weight, because there were so many people that were doing it incorrectly, and people started getting injuries. And they were like, well, let's go back to the very basics of basics, human movement, how to hold your posture, how to walk, how to run, how to, roll over from one side to the other. So they do a lot of, things with bands, and they lost a lot of people that were like, no, I'm a hardcore CrossFitter, I need to stay in, left the gym. But I think they're on to something, because they're really starting at the technique. And I know with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, technique is everything. That's why you can get a guy that's 5'5", 130 pounds come in and dominate someone that's 250 pounds and benches, 350. It's just the mechanics.
It's so funny. I read a great quote that really goes along with what you just said. Some rules are nothing but old habits that people are afraid to change. So, if you think I'm a hardcore CrossFitter and that this is my thing and there's no way I'm changing, it could be fear holding you back from trying something new. I was doing weightlifting for a number of years, and I fell out of it, and I got out of shape, and that's why I started doing the push-ups to get back into shape. And as I've progressed, I've started to take notice of all these. There's a bunch of different exercises you can do with your own body weight, and even Bear Grylls, the survivalist, who does the show Man vs. Wild, he talks about the importance of controlling your own body weight before you actually start lifting weights. And if you really think about it, when you're using heavy weights, your body's not necessarily designed to do that, and it makes you more open to injury. It's better to start off with exercises where you're using your own body weight, and you can control yourself. You're going to be less likely to hurt yourself.
Think of the movements that dancers and gymnasts do. I mean, those are not easy, but they're all body weight, and they have both of them, dancers and gymnasts, have like some of the most perfect bodies in the world. They're not, they don't look like these over muscled steroid guys, but they're very developed. And I mean, I would love to look like that.
Don't worry, Tom. One day you will.
Actually, when I was in high school, I remember someone thought I was a gymnast. And I was like flattered. I was like, oh, cool. Also, appreciate the path. So, you may, they say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. It's not necessarily the destination that you do want to get to your final goal, but it's the path that you're doing along the way that really is what's so rewarding and what is life. Like I want to be a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's going to take me a long time. The average is about 10 years or more. You're looking at 10 or 15 years, going a couple times a week. If you're there every day training, maybe down to 6 or 7, there's some people that are phenoms, like BJ Penn, MMA fighter, was known to get his black belt in 5 years, which is, unheard of. You just have to be really good in order to get it in 5 years. And, that's because he had natural talent. He was real flexible, and he just caught on and, really loved it and adapted to it. So, at each level, right now I'm a purple belt. It goes white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. Well, I stayed a blue belt for 4 years. So at that time, I appreciated it because I didn't feel, if I got dominated by someone that was a higher belt, I didn't feel out of place because I was learning. And if I did good against someone that was a higher belt, it made me really pumped up my not say ego, but it really just made me feel good because I felt like I was enjoying the journey. I was working towards something. It's almost like when you cut your grass and, you cut your backyard and you still have your front yard to do, but you look at your backyard and goes, damn, that looks good. It's like, it's rewarding because you could see something tangible that you've done. And the same thing can apply to life.
Yeah. So I don't know how far along you are on your list.
About a little over halfway.
Okay. Because I think it's important too to talk about, we talk about breaking the rules, so you can get your ass moving. And let's just, take a moment and for all those parents out there, I'm sure you can all relate to this, in that there are a different set of rules for children than there are for adults. And, like for instance, when you're a kid, you might have a 7:00 bedtime. Well, I can pretty much guarantee that most of you, well, except for Tom, because he has to wake up really early to go to work. But, most adults don't have a 7:00 bedtime. They stay up as late as they want, and they can cover that. The rules that you have when you're a kid, they're thrown out the window when you get to be an adult. But there are so many rules that we have in our lives that we keep, and they become habits. We don't even think about them. Think about how they guide our behavior and our actions. You should look at your own life and look at the rules that you follow, things that guide your behavior and your actions. And you might want to throw some of those out, and break those rules to get yourself going.
One of the perfect examples, John, one of the things I said was change is scary, right? Well, you can break that rule because sometimes it can be a great motivator. If you lose your job tomorrow, right, all of a sudden you're very motivated to find a way to feed your family and make money. So there are always an exception to the rule. We're just trying to give some guidelines. But, all these I'm sure can be twisted around to, turn it to another idea. Just like sure, rewards are great for change, but, there's also some, I know that's probably why the military still uses it. That, sometimes punishment, sometimes a fear of, oh man, something's going to happen if I don't get my act together. I'm going to have to change. So those are obviously, exceptions to the rules that we're talking about right here.
That's actually a great way to get your ass moving, is to put yourself in situations that are scary, where you do have no choice but to move forward. Most people are afraid to change, and they won't change unless they absolutely have to. Like the work example that you just gave, Tom, it's great because, if you're comfortable in your job, you might hate it, but it's the devil, and that's a lot easier to live with, than to look for a new job and to go to some unknown circumstance, unknown situation where you don't know the devil. And that can keep you in an unhappy situation for a long, long period of time.
Well, that's happening with me right now with my work. We consolidated, took our radio station and moved it in with our TV stations, which also have TV networks, and it's just a huge group of different media assets. And no longer, my boss changed, my hours have changed, my job title has changed, and my job responsibilities have changed. So there's a lot of stuff going. It's almost like I have a new job, but it's different for me because, I told John pretty soon I'm going to be working overnight weekends. Man, I haven't done overnight weekends since I was in the military and pulling like the mid shift on my airplane, so this is going to be something for me to have to get used to. But I'm trying to look at the silver lining in the clouds, as John always talks about, and saying, well, I'll have some of my days off and, I can go to the beach. Like this morning, I watched the sunrise with my wife, and I'm like, soon I'll be able to do that every day because I'm going to be working overnights. I'm going to work,
You'll be up when the sun comes up.
Yeah, I'll be coming home from work. Right as I get home from work, I could drive over to the beach and watch the sunrise.
That sounds really great, Tom. But I know this from experience. Do not just go to the beach after you've been working all night and close your eyes, because you will wake up and you'll be totally burned on one side of your body.
Especially me. I'll look like a lobster.
That happened to me when I was in college. I was working at a hospital, and I was working the graveyard shift. And it was the end of my, I was about ready to change, and I was going to start going to school, during the day. So I gave up my nighttime job, or my night shift job, and I wanted to go to the beach. It was like the end of summer, and it was going to be the last chance I had to do that. So after working all night, working for 10 hours, I hopped on my motorcycle and I drove to the beach, because I couldn't find anyone to go with me. It was kind of like a spur of the moment idea. And, all my friends were pissed at me because I was calling them at like 6 a.m, seeing if they wanted to go to the beach. But so I drove my motorcycle to the beach, which was like an hour and a half drive. I get there and I laid down my towel and I fell asleep, and I woke up like 4 hours later and I'm burnt to a crisp, but just on one side of my body.
Yeah, because something about the beach with that ocean calm air and the crashing of the waves and the gentle breeze blowing on you, and especially if it's warm with the sun, you pass out. And yeah, it's very easy just to fall asleep. That's why I always either bring an umbrella or find a palm tree. That's my refuge, because I just I'm unlike John. John's Italian and has or Italian Irish and has darker skin. I'm the light Irish. I got the fair skin, and we used to go to the beach. And I remember one time I wore this little football jersey, and it had little holes on it, so you could breathe. That's how jerseys are made for football. And I ended up with these little red dots all over me when I took my shirt off, because I was there all day at the beach with John, because he could handle the sun. I couldn't, But as a kid, I learned many, many times of severe sunburns, and that was one of them. I was like speckled.
Yeah, our friendship has just been it's been hell on Tom through the years, because especially living in Florida. But I guess the bottom line here is that it's good to change things up and adapt and create your own set of rules that you can live by, and take some risk, but also recognize that there are consequences involved with that. And you do need to keep your eyes open, and you need to be aware of those situations, or you're going to get burned.
It's probably getting about time to wrap this up, even though I had a few more points. Feel free to go to Psychology Today and look up the 10 rules of change. And, if you want to browse through and maybe get some more ideas on what you can do, what kind of rules you can follow, or what kind of rules you can break. The one I think I should mention, though, is it says change requires structure. And it talks about the strategy of identifying what works, revisit your plan regularly, and logically sequence events. And I think that's good advice. That's just like when you're talking about, if you're exercising, keep a log, keep track of what you eat, keep track of what weights and what reps you do, so you can kind of progress. You can kind of look back and, have a visual idea of if you're progressing or not, or if you need to change your program.
Yeah. I know we're trying to wrap up, but one thing has really been crossing my mind this whole time is I know there are going to be a lot of people out there who say break the rules. It's not good to break the rules, but so many of us, first need to understand what the rules are. And I think a lot of you, probably work work for a business where you get paid time off. And that is a rule. It's a guide for conduct and for action, and that's part of your benefit for working there is to get paid time off. I'm sure none of you feel bad about taking those days off. You've earned them. That's a rule that you take advantage of, and I think that's what we're talking about here is first knowing what the rules are, and then working them to your advantage, using them to your advantage. There's no reason why you should feel bad about taking advantage of those rules. They're there for you. They're there for that purpose. You've put in the time to take a day off. You've put in the time to stay home sick. There are rules in place, and we need to make sure that we use these to our advantage. And you can leverage these things to help you get what you want more out of life. So when we talk about breaking the rules, it's really understanding what the rules are, how they are created, why they're created, what the consequences are of breaking them, and then using your own judgment and applying those rules in ways that can help you make a better life. We're going to have a lot more talking, and that's how you make your life a game, and that's how you can enjoy life more. So we'll be talking more about gamifying your life. We hope that you enjoyed this segment on rules, but we'll be talking more about goals and about a scoring mechanism for your own life, as well as about your own attitude. Are you voluntarily trying to change, or are you just taking life as it comes and you're not changing because you want to? You're changing because you have to.
Well, I have a great ending music for us today, John. Instead of using our normal, we're going to go out with the Atari.
I like it.
Make sure you check out swiftkickinatheass.com and sign up for our email list. You'll get our free membership site with all kinds of courses and cool, good tools. Till later. Peace.
Peace. Thanks for listening.
Groovy.